Yes, he did.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this edition of Donnybrook, the first time since 1987 that we haven't been all together. In fact, we're scattered all over the greater St. Louis area and beyond. Let's meet those who are joining us for this special coronavirus edition of Donnybrook. From regions unknown, we have Wendy Weiss, the news director for KTRS. We also have with us from Walden Pond, Mr. Bill McClellan from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. From Ice Station Zebra, Mr. Ray Hartman, who is, of course, with the Riverfront Times and the Big 550 KTRS. And from the Green Tree City, Kirkwood, Missouri, we welcome Alvin Reed to our program.
It's the story of a man named Alvin.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, Bill McClellan, you've seen just about everything, and now we're seeing Donnybrook coming to our viewers like this. What a day it's been. The Four Seasons, the hotel on the Landing, has announced that it's closing at least temporarily, maybe longer than that. AMC Theaters, based in Missouri, laying off 600. The Cheesecake Factory at the Galleria has said it's not going to pay rent there or at any of the other 260 locations across the United States in the month of April. And the Convention and Visitors Commission, which gets money from hotels and motels, of course, has announced that it is laying off about half of its staff. Not a great week, not a great day. Where do you think we are right now?
Well, I think we're in trouble. I mean, and some of these places will clearly reopen, like, and I say this, and it's probably the kiss of death because I don't know what I'm talking about. The place like the Cheesecake Factory, they'll still be selling cheesecake and whatever else they sell soon enough. Some of the hotels I wonder about that maybe we're kind of culling the herd in more than just the human way. Maybe businesses that were marginal won't be coming back.
Anybody else want to jump in here?
I agree. And I'll say I'm really worried for the small restaurants. I think that the small restaurants, the individual proprietors, you see them quoted in the paper, a lot of them have some very serious challenges ahead. And those are folks that, are doing their best. But I'll tell you, there are some people we really, large and small, really, we have to be concerned about.
Well, I'm not as concerned about the large because I think the large are looking at their profit margin more than they're looking at, where it might go out of business. For the small, I would say that it's kind of like, water always finds a way to go. And I want everybody who's going through hard times right now to survive it. But if they don't, wherever they're at, somebody who is not involved right now will step up and maybe say, well, that's a good location. I think they were doing good business before all this started, not to take advantage, but just because the opportunity is there. And on a lighter note, I was in Chicago this past weekend getting my oldest daughter, Bryce's stuff out of her dorm, and drove past a restaurant that had a sign up that said closed for remodeling, and it had like the dates on it. And they actually closed to remodel the place starting like about 14 days ago. And you're thinking to yourself, like, man, if you had to be closed for remodeling, what a perfect time. So
well, look at MoDOT. MoDOT is really taking advantage of the low volume on the highways and doing a lot of really important construction work. So they are certainly finding the funding, but I think we are seeing a lot of thinking outside of the box, people being very creative in ways that they haven't had to be creative before.
Well, another thing that's scary is the whole brick and mortar economic structure was under a lot of pressure because of all the online buying. And if you put these people where they're not making any money for a couple of months, it may not make economic sense to come back to a brick and mortar store. The thing's terribly frightening to me.
I think it's a really good point, especially I think now Amazon is going to try and capitalize on this. Who wouldn't, of course? And apparently businesses up at Amazon and they're hiring. But don't forget, with Amazon, they do pay the 4.225% sales tax to the state of Missouri, but they do not pay any of the local taxes, which the brick and mortar stores do. And so it's kind of like a double whammy. The brick and mortars are getting hurt really badly because in some cases they're forced to close. And the cities and towns that rely on that sales tax, they're not getting that money, but Amazon is getting a windfall. Now,
is there any way we can do something about that?
Yeah, it's called a Wayfair law, and a lot of states have changed their sales tax laws to allow cities and towns to collect from Amazon, but not Missouri. And it's something believe it or not, Ray, our legislature hasn't taken that up.
You mean the body, the governmental body formerly known as the General Assembly? I mean, well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
To me, it's just unbelievable that the General Assembly right now, last week, the House of Representatives supposedly stayed in session when the Senate adjourned so they'd get a budget done. Then a dog ate their homework and they only got part of the budget. They got $40 million. Now, I had Kristen on a couple nights ago. The $40 million, which 33 of it was federal pass-through, and the $7 million from the state, which is a pittance, is waiting for the Senate to come back. And we can figure out Donnybrook by Zoom and by video. They can't figure out a way for 31 senators to meet to approve this $40 million. They're treating it like it's some transit study can wait. People are sick and dying, and the $40 million is stuck because the Missouri Senate can't get it to act together enough to send it to the governor. I just think, I don't care what your politics are.
Ray, you've had some great guests lately, and tonight I might point out that Amy Shaw, our fearless leader at the KETC 9 Network, is going to be your guest to talk about the educational programming and the educational toolkit that's available to everybody. We can learn more about that by listening to you. And of course, going to 9network.org. And I might also add that you had Steve Ellman, the St. Charles County executive, on the other night. And he has taken a different approach from the county and the city. In St. Charles, they want everyone to practice social distancing, but businesses can stay open if they feel that they are essential. What do you think about this policy?
I wish he went further than he's going, but I will say this, spending gave a generous amount of time. He's got a different dynamic in terms. His advice to people very strongly is to stay home. He's not, in conflict with Sam Page or Lyda Krewson. But I think he's got a problem where if he gets too far out ahead of the folks that is not going to listen to him, they are trying to get people to stay home. I wish it was a flat out.
Well, Ray,
I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying.
I know you're not, but I'm saying I like Steve, and I think he's a fine fellow. But at a time when a leader has to lead, he can't be looking and saying, well, if I say this, they might not follow. If you're going to be a leader, you got to lead.
We don't allow, Ray, we don't allow people to decide for themselves whether they have had too much to drink. He would not leave that up to the decision of residents in St. Charles County. This is very similar to that because the possibility is we have seen in the state of Illinois in one day, 673 new cases in just one day. So you're talking about exponential transmission. And by leaving it up to the business, to the business owner whose heart is in the right place, certainly you're asking for that kind of calamity. And Bill is right. This is the penalty of leadership. You have to lead during the difficult times.
Well,
Let
what
the
is
record show
different?
I said I disagree with him. I just was
I
trying.
know.
I'm not.
No, I know.
I'm not trying to. I would rather not be on his.
Alvin?
Steve Elman.
What is different from what he is saying, really, as opposed to what is going on in St. Louis County? Because I don't think they name other than restaurants, which can do carry out and that. But I mean, what businesses have they just said could not stay open? Now, did the county declare that manicures and pedicures and things like that are out, or are people just choosing to do that? It's a really fine line. I don't know what the difference is.
I think Alvin brings up a good point because there are a lot of exceptions in Illinois and in St. Louis City and St. Louis County to the stay in place rule. In Illinois, you can buy recreational pot. In Missouri, or rather in our two counties, you can go to a liquor store, and dry cleaners are open, daycares are open, and it's almost as if we don't really have a lockdown. I mean, if we're really trying to prevent the spread of the virus, it seems like 60% of things are still open.
Charlie, the county and the city gave out a list of business. They gave a list out of exceptions. So to help question, if you're not on that list, and interestingly, news media is on that list, but it's not.
Well, it has to be,
list.
right?
Well, no, I get it, but I'm just saying it's not.
Well, radio has to be. I don't know about newspapers.
Well, it's a list, is my point, and things like hair salon. And I do not believe, for example, that any business that can't follow the 6-foot rule should be allowed open anywhere. So, for example, hair salons, tattoo parlors. It's my understanding that
and Ray,
not many are, but they shouldn't be.
Also, apparently not on the list, Ray. Anyone who sells razors.
Speaking of the lists and everything, apropos of nothing, maybe it is kind of cool to see grocery store clerks suddenly getting a lot of respect.
Yes,
and being like first responders. And by gosh, these people, they're showing up to work every day, and it's just kind of nice to see people looking at them with newfound respect.
That's for sure. And truck drivers too. I mean, when you think of the supply chain and how vital truck drivers are, and I drove past the virtual care center this morning on the way to the radio station, and there was a nurse standing. There were probably 15 cars lined up to take the test, and there was a nurse standing there in the rain. And just thinking about it, I mean, I had to really concentrate not to cry because it was so overwhelming and so completely typical of these nurses.
Yes.
Well, and
to put themselves and doctors to put themselves in harm's way.
I was going to say, to Wendy's point, the ultimate heroes, the first line heroes, are the people such as your spouse, Wendy, who are in the healthcare profession, because those folks are literally putting their lives and that of their families at risk on the front line, much like first responders generally do, as we take it for granted. In effect, particularly in places like New York, hopefully it won't be as horrible here, but they are literally like the people that are going into the World Trade Center, because they are treating people with the virus in person and putting themselves and their family. And you cannot,
that's so true.
You cannot
Ray,
possibly say enough for those people. For real.
You are correct, but my husband in administration would not be happy with me if I didn't tell you that he's in a support position.
Well, that's right.
That's true. Well, let me just say, I think anyone married to one of the five of us deserves an extra medal. That's for sure.
True.
Okay, Wendy, I want to ask you, because last week you said that Mayor Lyda Krewson deserves some extra praise for her role in the past couple of weeks. Let's take a look at some of our leaders. Who do you think is standing out? Governor Cuomo, President Trump, Governor Parson, Auditor Galloway. Go down the list, if you will.
Well, I think it really depends on your political perspective, and it makes me very sad to see us looking at this pandemic from the silos, that we talk about so often. I think President Trump, I have not been able to watch a few of his most recent news briefings, but he seems to have, at least I hope he's figured out. A lot of people were criticizing the fact that he was making it more about him, that they almost sounded like campaign rallies instead of a way to highlight and showcase the experts, including Dr. Fauci, all of the experts, the Surgeon General. I think that Governor Cuomo, his political capital is very, very high right now. He's got a great deal of it in his political profile. There's a draft Cuomo movement out there in terms of drafting him for the Democratic nomination. Governor Parson, he's moving too slowly for a lot of people, including Republicans, and I'm sure that to some Republicans he's moving too quickly. So, but Governor Pritzker has his hands full. Governor Newsom out in California. I think Lyda's done a great job. Sam Page.
Anybody else?
Charlie, can I jump in? Because I'm at a safe distance to disagree with Ms. Weiss on this a little bit. First of all, I don't think it's, and maybe some people are looking at it through their prism. There's a lot of Republican governors like DeWine and Hogan. There's a lot of them that are doing a great job. I mean, it's not, I don't think the governors, and I think Mike Parson is an exception to that, and has been doing I don't know how much worse he could be doing. Now, he's dealing with a lot of legislators that are saying things like they don't want to spread this myth, and they basically do view it in Missouri, outstate, a lot of them, as a hoax. But wow. He could not be doing less. I will say, and obviously, I think, you look at Donald Trump's ratings being the highest they ever are. They're up to like 49% in a recent poll. But compare that where George W. Bush was after 9/11. This is a national emergency. I was one of the 91% that had a favorable viewing of George W. Bush after 9/11. 49% is unbelievably awful in the middle of a national crisis. I do think Lyda Cruz and Sam Page have done just fine. And I think Mike Parson has been just awful.
All politics are local, as they say. And look, I know that individual, jurisdictions may not have the budget to do it, but I don't want to start maybe at the mayor, city council level, but where are mayors and where are city councils? And where is Ann Wagner and where is Lacey Clay? And I don't mean kind of like, you could appear on, and Ray, you had him on your show and whatnot, but where is the daily update from the people we elect to represent us? Now, we can debate about Congress and the president all day long, but it's pretty simple that maybe you could start alleviating some fears at the local level.
Well, the governor, both governors, Pritzker and Parson, have daily briefings. Mayor Crewson certainly has briefings when she has something new to report, like with the Red Cross worker. I don't know that there's any rhyme or reason at this point.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure all the congressmen need to have a daily briefing.
Well, maybe not a daily briefing, but
something.
Where are we at? Yeah. What are you doing?
Well, Congress passed a $2 trillion relief package. That's a lot of action, actually.
And could I ask you all? I mean, I'm not an economics professor or anything like that, but do you release the funds 2 or 3 or 4 days into what is going to be a protracted crisis? Or do you wait a little while? That's the only thing that scares me. I mean, we are barely 4 or 5 days into this.
I think you got to act.
I want to hear from my fellow founder. He's trying to get a word in here.
Well, I was going to say, as far as Alvin's point about the congressman, I'm in Congressman Clay's district, and I actually got a taped phone call yesterday.
Okay.
The sort that you usually hang up on, but it was Congressman Clay, and I thought to myself, well, this is a pretty good thing, because he's probably has a lot of constituents who, like me, have landlines and who don't follow the news very much. Not that I'm in that class, but I thought good for the congressman.
Very good for him.
Getting a
See,
message
okay,
out.
I'm not in the
Right.
first district.
Alan,
So
can I-
I
Charlie,
stay.
Let's
Charlie,
move
can I
on if
say-
we will, because we
Charlie,
have limited
one other-
time here. And
Charlie,
there's another
can I say
topic
one
I did want to get to. And Alvin, we're going to go to you on this one. The construction on the MLS stadium is continuing, even in this age of COVID-19. And Dan Buck, who is leading the crusade, I shouldn't say crusade, leading the effort to get a new athletic center at the old St. Louis Mills shopping complex, is now asking for his state support, his local tax dollar support in advance. He wants $6 million in advance as opposed to paid off over a 10-year period. What do you make of both these things? Construction at the stadium as well as paying the athletic complex off early?
Don't have a problem with construction continuing. I work at a health and nutrition store, and we have been open, so I'm going to work. Okay, so but with construction, I think when you start talking about, and I don't want to make it numbers, but costs, things like that, I don't have a problem with construction projects continuing. Okay, you point out the MLS, but they could be building a hospital somewhere, and
Sure.
That's continuing. Dan Buck, shameful, tone deaf, ridiculous, out of hand. I could go on for the rest of the show. I don't even know how one looks into a camera or actually says that with a straight face. That's just out.
Well, there's no harm in asking, and that's his job, right? Although, if he's getting his money from the Convention and Visitors Commission and hotels are largely empty, I think there are a lot of projects, including the $210 million renovation of the convention center, that might be put on hold for a long time.
Oh, yeah. There's only anybody who's working construction, that work has already been paid for or has been paid for into the future. The day that they would just stop getting paid would be the day that they would not be on that site anymore.
Hey, and Ray, I want to ask you about, you've been in newspapers for your entire career. And starting, I think, with the Man-Eater in Columbia, right? So now we found out this week that the RFT is kind of cutting back. So is the Riverfront Times, the St. Louis American, the Webster Kirkwood Times, the North Sider, and the South Sider. I don't think we've had a week for newspapers this bad, not in my lifetime anyway. What do you say?
Well, the RFT rather heroically, after saying it wasn't going to have print edition, a bunch of people who work there are so passionate, so proud of them, just voluntarily put it out. You have to say, for free newspapers, the fundamental problem of distribution is most of the places you distribute it are closed, with the exception of the grocery stores. And so that is most of those publications you get at restaurants, you get at retail shops that are not open. And so that it's too early to tell. I think like the guys at the Webster Kirkwood Times, Dwight Bidikoff or Don Corrigan, have been fighting the good fight for literally nearly a half a century. And I have so much respect for them. And I'm just hoping that they're able to come back. I think they're a lot like these other restaurants and retailers we're talking about. We're not going to know what it's going to look like till we are on the other side. Can I say one thing on that construction thing? I'm only okay with it if they're really practicing social distancing. I've got a friend whose husband had to come home sick from a construction site in the city, not this one. And it's not, I'm not so good with it unless we're really practicing the kind of social distancing there that everybody else is needing to do.
I saw crews on the side of the highway today coming back, and there was no social distancing going on. None.
The places I've seen,
okay.
They're not social distancing. And I'm not going to get out my car and say, hey, construction worker, social distance.
Well, then they ought to not be out there.
Agreed.
Okay. Hey, Bill, what do you think about the newspapers?
Well, I'd like to give a shout out to my old colleagues on the Post-Dispatch who are going out there and they're talking to people and they're going to press conferences and they're putting the information out at a time when newspaper reporters are reviled and people are getting news from Facebook. And my friends and colleagues are still out there. And, I admire them, and I'd also like to give a shout out to the nurses at Barnes Hospital who took care of me Monday. But I'm very scared about newspapers. I was scared about newspapers before all this started, of course.
Okay. Want to ask you, Alvin Reed about the city and the county deciding to release some inmates. At least the circuit attorney in the city and the prosecutor in the county have said, hey, these jails are just a little bit too full at a time of COVID-19. On the other hand, Judge Jimmy Edwards, the public safety director for the city of St. Louis, said, hey, there's a little concern here because if these individuals are on the streets, that may not give us enough time to warn their victims or witnesses. And so you wonder, have we really thought this through?
Well, that was my concern last week, and I'm with Jimmy Edwards on that. Maybe it has to happen. Maybe it can happen. It doesn't have to happen tomorrow or the next day. Let's get it right and get the right people who really deserve to be out there and nonviolent crimes and things like that. And in the meantime, if you are stuck in jail, well, you are stuck in jail. I hate to sound cruel, but that's reality.
I'm with Wesley Bell and Kim Gardner on this. They are taking pains, according to them, and I believe them, to keep this limited to nonviolent offenders. And they make a great point that among the people, Kim Gardner made this point, that on the air, started on TV, that among the people we're concerned about are the prison workers and the corrections workers.
Fair point, Ray, but unfortunately, we have an unforgiving clock, and so we have to say goodbye. Thank you to you all, wherever you are, and thank you for joining us for this edition of Donnybrook. We'll see you next week at this time.
Bye.
Bye.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.